If you are building a greenhouse, high tunnel, or hoop house, you will likely need to frame end walls. And if you want to avoid future issues with wood warping and rotting lumber, a metal end wall framing may be just what you've been looking for. Now, this video covers the process for anchoring and framing the end walls of your structure. And regardless of how large or small your structure is, the principles of this video still provide a good groundwork for laying out and framing for doors, vents, and more. Now, this video is intended to supply specific guidance for those that purchase one of our DIY kits. So just be aware that this video is a little bit longer than most of our other videos, and this is due to the fact that it includes detail on the methods and techniques we use that may help along with the whole process of installing an end wall. Now, before we jump into the steps to building out your end walls, this video assumes that your structure's end hoop has already been plumbed in using the corner cross braces that were installed, and it also assumes that you've run a string across the front face of your structure in preparation for the next steps. Now let's jump into framing your end wall with steel. Grab your provided end wall anchors, which are a smaller diameter tube than your square tubing. The tools you'll need for this job is a corner level, vice grips or welding clamps, a standard level, tape measures, a drill driver that will use a 3/8 hex head driver, a socket wrench with a 1/2-inch socket, and of course, a sledgehammer. Once the string has been run across the front face of your structure, you can now mark for center, and in this case it is the center of those 3 lines there. And then from that center line you will measure off for half of the rough opening of whatever your center door will be or whatever your center opening will be. And this will be what we use to drive in our first ground post on our end wall. Make sure your first end wall anchor is plumb in both directions and that it is resting on the appropriate side of the line that you ran across the front face of your structure. You can now pound in your end wall anchor until about 10 to 12 inches remain above ground, and you'll notice that the top of it, if you hit it with the sledgehammer, is a little mushroomed. Cut that off with a sawzall or a hacksaw, and then you're able to slide on your 2-inch square tubing right on top of that anchor. Here's what your square tubing will look like when it's fully seated on top of your end wall anchor. Now you're ready to put a brace band on your hoop, and using channel locks or something similar, you can bring that brace band to within a distance where a bolt can get through it, like that, and you're ready to attach that first upright. And so you're going to attach the first square tube upright to the hoop using this brace band, and then a 1 1/4 inch bolt and associated 1/2-inch drive nut. Throw a level on the side of the upright to make sure it's in the right position, and then secure with an impact drive or socket wrench. And once it's secure, this is what it will look like. And take note that this bracket here, the way it's oriented towards the outside. Now that our first upright is in, we're going to work off of that upright, and using our pre-cut horizontal pieces that will go in between them, we're going to create a little spacer so that we know exactly where we need to drive our second end wall anchor. And so using that spacer there, we're going to throw that corner level on, line it up with the string, and begin pounding it in. Now, I've sped up the speed on this 2.5 times its normal speed, but you can see as I'm pounding this in, I'm throwing the corner level on to make sure it's plumb as I'm going down, taking a moment to, when I need to, adjust the trajectory of that end wall anchor ground post. And, you can see here I'm putting a spud bar in and just kind of angling it to make sure it's going in nice and plumb. But I continue this process until, it's in the ground. Roughly 10 to 12 inches are remaining above ground, and then I will cut that mushroom top there. As you can see, it's kind of starting to mushroom as I hit it with the sledgehammer. And after I cut that off, I'm ready to slide on my next upright piece. Here's that same end wall anchor with the top cut off so that we can slide square tube on top of it. And you can see there's roughly 12 inches remaining above ground. So we're taking that 2-inch square tube upright and sliding it right over top all the way into the ground when it's seated completely. You'll then repeat the process for attaching the top of that upright to the hoop itself. And then you're ready to move on to your next upright piece of square tubing. And as you might guess, the process remains the same. We're using a spacer from a pre-cut piece that is the exact width we want between our upright members, throwing on the corner level and lining it up with the string and beginning the process for pounding the anchor into the ground. And we continue to hammer the anchor into the ground, periodically checking that corner level to make sure it's plumb as we drive it into the ground. And we're going to continue this until there's 10 to 12 inches remaining above ground, just like the other upright anchors. And at that point, we're going to put that brace band on the hoop, and just like before, we're going to attach that upright to the hoop. And we're going to attach to the hoop just like we did the other two. And so we're going to slide it first onto that end wall anchor, right down until it's completely seated into the ground. And what we like to do is we like to put on a level to make sure it's in the right spot. But what we'll also do is we will run a tape measure to confirm we have the correct width, and then we will pin it in with the 1/2-inch drive impact and socket. So this end wall gets 4 upright members, and so as you can see here, we have 3 done. It's just 1 more that remains, and this is exactly where we'll put it. Once again, using the pre-cut horizontal member as our spacer and using a corner level and that string as a guidance, we're going to get that in place where it needs to be and begin pounding it and anchoring it in place. Using the corner level, hammering it down till it's 10 to 12 inches out of the ground, sliding on that 2-inch square steel tube member, and once again attaching it to the hoop at the top. That'll be our 4th upright. Double checking the measurement to make sure that the width between the uprights matches the width of the spacer we used at the bottom. And then we're going to pin it into place. And we're ready to move on to our horizontal members. And we'd like to start in the center and work our way up and out. With all of these studs completely installed on your end wall, we like to start with some horizontal members. And you'll notice there are L brackets on the ends of these. There's 2 of them, 1 on each end. And because there's going to be a door for our opening here, we want those facing down. So in order to do that, and without being significantly above grade, we have to etch away some of the earth. So you can see here I'm just using a spud bar to get rid of some of the earth so that the metal that makes up your door's threshold doesn't create, 1, a trip hazard for people walking in and out, and 2, so I can fashion and secure those L brackets to the upright studs so they're facing downward. And the reason we want them to face downward is we have a door, and it's going to be difficult to impossible to install the type of doors that this structure is getting, at least if that L bracket were to be facing on the upward direction. Now we're going to take this horizontal member and we're going to work it in between those 2 upright studs. And you can see here it's snug. That's okay. You can tap it in using channel locks. Here's what I'm doing. You can pound it in with your fist or something like that if it's not too tight. But it's going to be tight because you framed for that exact width. So here we are. We're putting it into the space between the 2 uprights. I'm adjusting for level, and you can see that the L brackets on this particular horizontal member are facing downward once again because there will be a door, a pre-hung door in this case, installed right in the space that I'm working on. It's level, as you can see here. So now that it's level, we can secure it, and the L brackets, as I said, are facing downward. I like to leave 2 holes available for attaching because I find it easier to have 2 spots to kind of aim for when I'm on ladders or on the ground or anything like that. And just one last check there of the level. It looks good. So we're gonna go ahead and drive tech screws, self-tapping tech screws into each of those holes. So it's gonna get 2 points of securement into the square tubing, and then it's also going to be driven through the anchor behind the square tubing. So make sure you drive it into each of those, and make sure it's flush with the front face of your tunnel as well. So you don't only want it to fit between the 2 upright studs, but you do want that horizontal member to be flush across the front face as well. Here I am driving the second screw into this L bracket. Now both techs have been driven. You double check to make sure it's still level, which it is. And the other side here also has 2 techs driven to shore up where the door threshold will be. Once your threshold's installed, or that bottom horizontal member, you can measure up to where your door header will be. And in this case, it's 80 inches. So we're going to measure up 80 inches and we're going to make a mark using a permanent marker. We then repeat that process from the other side of the opening, and we get some clamps ready to hold the header in place using the L brackets. Now, L brackets have been pre-secured on all these horizontal members, as you can see. One there and one there. And you want these facing up and out of the way of the door. Now it's time to fit the horizontal member so that the bottom of it lines up with the permanent marker marks that you had made in the previous step, and throw a level on it. I like to attach the L brackets with some clamps while I adjust for level. Here's a close-up of what that looks like. The clamps covering one of the holes, while one of the L bracket holes are available to screw self-tapping techs through. And here I am doing just that. Again, the L brackets are pointing up towards the sky, so they're going to be out of the way of whatever door is framed here. Each side of the rough opening gets 2 self-driving tech screws. And after I drive one side, I'm just checking for level again, making any slight adjustments that might be necessary before I permanently drive in the other side of that header. And once those final screws are driven, this is what it will look like. You'll have those tech screws to the north of your door, and you're ready to proceed. The process essentially repeats itself. So this piece of tube is going to go on the very top in between section of your 2 studs that you're looking at here, and there's going to be a vent underneath it. So the L brackets are going to face towards the sky. They're going to shoot right up north of that vent. And now I'm just going to fit it into place just like I did before. So, very familiar. If you've done the first few steps here, you're going to follow and repeat pretty much for all of the other horizontal members. So we're going to go through these a bit quicker. Once this unit is about 3 inches below the very top of those upright studs, we're going to check for level. Don't be afraid to use some clamps to hold those L brackets in place, and depending on how tight a fit you have, you might have to use clamps as well. And now you're ready to drive tech screws into the L brackets. You're nearly a professional at this point, so I've sped this part up just so we can measure off of this a little quicker and get the rough opening for that vent completed. Again, just checking periodically for level and driving the final self-tapping tech screws. Now that the top of the vent has been installed, it's now time to measure down so you can get the complete rough opening framed for where that vent will eventually be installed. And so I'm measuring down from that header to where that bottom horizontal member will be installed. I'm making a mark with permanent marker. The framing for this particular vent is 30.5 inches by 30.5 inches. So now that I have my marks, I'm going to use the welding clamps that have been helping us hold the L brackets, get one in place to hold it at the mark, bring the other end up to the mark, and the same process holds. Throw a level on it, double check your measurements for the rough opening, and drive in some self-tapping tech screws. Again, note that the L brackets are on the outside of your rough opening. The rough opening for your vent has now been framed. Once the center framing portions of your end wall installation are done, I like to work out towards the sides of the structure. So you can see here we're working on the next horizontal members to the left or the right of the door because the door is centered in this case. So I've run a string from side to side across the front face of the structure, and I've pushed that string down. As you can see there, it's kind of running pretty level to the top of the other horizontal members that have already been installed. And this is going to be our guide. We're going to try to get close to that string in order to get to a point where the members are low enough where air can't get in and that kind of thing. Now to do that, I have to etch away some of the earth here. So you can see I'm removing, with the spud bar, loosening it up, shoveling it out. And once I can fit that horizontal member so that it's relatively in line with that string, I can secure that to the upright studs. And unlike the center horizontal member that we're going to have to the bottom of the door, these L brackets can face up. They're easily accessible and there's no door going in this portion, so it won't really change anything. So we're going to fit it in place, get a level out, we're going to level it off, and we're going to screw it in place, just like we did with all the other L brackets. We're going to continue working on that same section of end wall framing, and we just put in that bottom horizontal member, and there's most always a horizontal member or two that are up high that you would need a ladder to get to. So now that we did the bottom one, we're going to get the top horizontal member up to where it belongs, and for this particular end wall, this horizontal member is going to line up with the door header. And you can see here, we're just lining it up to that door header, and because we know it's going to come off of the header itself, we're going to just kind of line it up by eye and throw in some self-tapping Tek screws through the L brackets and into the square steel tube stud. Now, the reason we're doing this without a level, because once we get the left side even with that door header, we can adjust the right side easily. We can throw a level on it, move it around as necessary, and drive Tek screws without having to worry about the other side being held in because it's already teched in. So everything's teched in, we're all level here and lined up with the door header, and we can now move on to the next section of your end wall framing. If you purchased one of our DIY kits, you'll notice that the outermost horizontal members that came with your end wall framing kits are a little long, and this is intentional. We sent longer outermost horizontal members just in case you had problems when you were anchoring your end wall studs, and maybe they moved a little bit because they hit a rock or something. We wanted to ensure that you had enough steel to make contact with your hoop. So what I'm doing here is I'm making a mark. I'm kind of laying them out and where it will fit in between the side of the hoop and the upright stud. I'm making a mark where I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to trim just a little bit of that steel right off of the horizontal member. And you can use a hacksaw, and in this situation I'm using a reciprocating saw, which is just a battery operated hacksaw really. And we'll cut off what we've marked, and we're actually going to mark the other horizontal member, which will end up being installed above this one. We're going to cut it to the same length because it will be installed from the stud to right before the hoop bends. Now that these horizontal members are trimmed to the right size, install L brackets on the end that you just cut off and trimmed from, and you'll have L brackets on each end of it now, and you can begin the securement process. Just like the horizontal members that fit between your upright studs, the horizontal members on the sides of your structure that go from stud to hoop are connected in a similar way. So you can see the L bracket on the left of your screen there is facing upward, and depending on the type of structure you have, you will have the L bracket on the other side either facing upward as well to secure to the ground post, or you'll have the L bracket pointing along the base frame. So that'll secure to the actual base frame of the structure for systems that are anchored with a base frame anchoring method. Now that you're level and in place, you can drive those Tek screws through the L brackets and secure that member. That bottom piece is done, so we're moving up to the other horizontal member that is going to connect to the hoop, and we are leveling it off. We're using the welding clamps, the vice grips that we've been using as extra pairs of hands, and we're going to get it to a point where it's level, and both of those L brackets are facing in the same direction for this particular horizontal member, and we're going to screw using self-tapping screws right into the hoop, and we're going to level it off once again, readjust the welding clamp, and drive the rest of the Tek screws into the L brackets. Now both of those horizontal members are attached with L brackets as you see here, and you can repeat the process on the other side of your tunnel. And since we just ran through how to do this and you're an expert, we sped this up significantly, but we wanted to show it again one more time so you can go through the process. Measuring, cutting, attaching L brackets, then bringing up the L brackets to level on the bottom unit. The top horizontal member is cut to the same length as the bottom one. It's going to be installed right before the hoop starts to bend. We put a level on it to see where level is. We're driving a Tek screw on that side, putting the level back on it, bringing the other side back up to where it needs to be, and boom, all of your end wall framing is done. And this is now the finished product for what the framing will look like on this specific structure. Now every structure is a little bit different. Every structure has a different configuration of fans, vents, doors, and what have you. But for this particular model of structure, this end wall is now framed, and doors and vents can be installed. Spring wire channel can be installed around the door and vents, and you can proceed with the next steps of the project. And if you're interested in watching more videos like this one, or that have to do with other aspects of greenhouse or season extension structures, please subscribe to our channel. And if you're interested in checking out any of the items that were featured in this video, there will be direct links in the description of the video. Thanks for watching.